Well, welcome. My name is Matt Williams. I am the technical evangelist for a company called Yottaa. I just want to get an idea. How many of you have actually heard of Yottaa? Wow, that's awesome. That's huge.
I don't remember what it is.
Sorry?
I don't remember what it is.
Okay. Well, we're a company we're focused on web performance and security, and we're a startup based here in Boston, over on Summer Street. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is not so much about specifically about what we do, but some of the data that we've been collecting over the last few months or so. And because I think it's pretty interesting, we've basically been looking at about 14,000 different sites on the net, and collecting that information because, as a company, we do two major types of things. First off, we try to optimize, well, we definitely optimize your site. We try to make it faster, try to make it more condensed, more stuff filled in a smaller space that can download very quickly. Make it feel like that site is local, wherever you happen to be. So we will optimize your site. The other piece that we do is monitor your site, to let you know what's going on with your site at any given time. Let you see how performance is changing over time. If it's really good today, and it's really good all the time, except, man, 4 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it tanks. What's going on? With our tool, you can click and kind of go drill in and figure out exactly what's going on. But again, I don't want to talk too much about what we do, not right at the beginning. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but mostly I want to show this data. And so actually, the title here is Empirical Correlation of Content, SEO, Performance, and User Engagement. Now, that's a long title. And I've been to a few of these meetups. I've been to a few of the ones for WebPerf in Boston. I've also been to a few of them in Amsterdam, where I was living before. And I've seen that these groups they don't tend to have one type of person in here. You're not all the same type of person. Because I've seen some people who are very, very technical, really technical. And then I've seen some people who are not. They're focused on other things, not the technical side. And I think what we're going to talk about is going to be interesting to both groups. And so if that title worries you, if you're scared of that title, don't worry. Got an alternate. Some cool charts and ways to apply what you learn. And it's basically the same kind of thing. So I'm going to show you some basically information that we've been collecting. All right, let's get into it. So again, what are we going to talk about? We've got two topic areas. There's the study of correlations. We're going to look at some different types of information and how they relate to each other. And then we're going to take on some next steps and look at some tips for optimizing your site. How can you make your site a bit faster? We'll also talk about testing and monitoring, which are, again, some of the features that we offer. And you've got on your chair, I don't know why nobody likes the front row, but on your chair there is a little pamphlet, and on that pamphlet there is at the bottom, okay, yes, I know you're not Boston front-end developers, but I had some extras. And there's a little URL. You can www.yottaa.com/fedev. And if you go there, you'll be able to sign up for a free account and be able to monitor your own site. So I'll be talking about some of that testing and monitoring. And a lot of what I talk about, you can actually use other tools as well, but I'll be using Yottaa as an example. Okay, so let's get into So Yottaa. As part of what we do, we've got data centers around the world, in the cloud, some physical, some in the cloud. And in those data centers, we've got browsers, real browsers, on real machines. We got Firefox, different versions of Firefox. We got Chrome, got Internet Explorer, a couple of versions of IE. And we've got these things all around the world. And when you have a Yottaa account or you go to websitetest.com, you can plug in a URL and say, well, where do you want to test from? I can set up one test that tests from San Francisco and Portland and New York and Miami and Amsterdam and Dublin and Singapore and Sydney. And one time, click go, have it do maybe 10 samples in each location, or 50 samples, or 90, or 99 samples in each location. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So we've basically fed about 14,000, okay, more than 10,000, but really about 14,000 sites into that engine and said, okay, collect that stuff, figure it out, find everything you can about these sites. And we basically collected two kinds of information. We looked at user experience, we looked at site content, and then used that data we're going to see. So user experience and site content, and we correlated that with some information that we've collected from some partners of ours. Some partners of ours were able to provide some information that helped us make sense of this data. So user experience and site content. Again, I said there are different types of people in this group. Different types of, some technical, some not so technical. I think the technical ones might know some of what I'm going to talk about next, and I want to make sure we're all on the same level. So when I talk about user experience, what am I really talking about? Well, we call it front-end user experience, and there's really four main stats that we try to collect, that we collect for all these different sites, 14,000. First off, there's time to interact. And in this case, it was just under 7 seconds. And then there's time to title, time to start render, and time to display. For some of you, that might not mean anything. So here's an example looking at CNN, looking at what happens at each of these intervals. First off, we've got time to title. And basically what time to title means is we see the title show up in the tab or in the top of your browser. For CNN, it might say CNN breaking news or headline news or whatever it says up there on the top of the window. Time to first paint. We see the first bits of, in this case, it's the branding of CNN, that red bar at the top. So we see the first bits of information showing up in the browser that we can see. And for CNN, this happened after about 4 seconds. Time to display. Time to display means all the HTML, the images, most of the static content is showing up on the page, but the JavaScript hasn't really had a chance to fully execute. That doesn't happen until time to interact. Time to interact means I can interact with the site. I can start typing away. I can enter in a search in the search box, or clicking links to find out news stories on CNN. So time to interact is that length of time before a user can interact with the page. And across all those 14,000 sites that we looked at, we saw that the median was around 6 seconds. In the case of CNN, it's a lot slower than that. It was about 9 seconds nearly. So that's the kind of basic stats that are really important when it comes to user experience. Now, we're talking only about front end. We're not talking about the back end so much, because if you follow, one of the guys who's very influential in this kind of space, a guy named Steve Souders, and there's a few others who are very influential, again, in this space, and they all talk about the front end versus the back end. And the front end is where so much of the time for when you open up your browser, the front end is taking up so much time. The back end is really just attributed to that first HTML. You click a link on to go to a website. The server kind of thinks about, okay, I need to process that. I need to generate this HTML file. Okay, here it is. And it hands off that HTML file, and that's what that first line is. And then all the contents of the HTML file, all the other assets, as that's downloading, that's all the front end. In this case, this is, what is this? This is the Barack Obama website. And we see it's really, really small at the top. That back end is much less than the usual 10%. It's tiny, tiny amount of time there. And the front end is where we, as Yottaa, that's where we spend our time trying to optimize your site. And that's where most of the user experience happens, and that's why we've looked at those 4 main stats. Okay, so user experience is one thing. Site content is the other thing that we talk about, or that we look at. So what does site content mean? Site content is, and complexity, is basically summarized in this little screenshot from our site. Here we can see, I don't know what site this is, but it's a full download size. All the stuff on the page came out to 2.3 megs. Pretty big page. All the requests, the number of assets, the number of links that are inside that page that it needs to download to make the web page pretty, that added up to 303 different requests that it needed to download. Every single one of those requests is going to take a little bit of time, and that's where all this overall time comes from. It's grabbing stuff from 41 different domains all over the place. 27 HTML files, that's pretty huge. 46 JavaScript files, what's up with that? That's just insane. And 8 CSS files, 200. I mean, this is a pretty interesting site. So that's some of what we collect. There's actually a little bit more information, total downloads. I think most of this was actually in that little screenshot. This kind of describes each of those pieces, which I think I've already done. So user experience and site content. Those are, again, the 2 main things that we're looking at. User experience, content size, and content complexity. Any questions so far? Yeah?
Okay, so your expertise is to make recommendations about how to pare down some of these large numbers of things that are happening in the front end?
Yeah, our main business is doing this optimization for you automatically and also letting you know what needs to be done.
Okay, so when you say automatically, you're taking whatever existing web pages you have and you're processing them in some way, spits out a optimized product,
optimized version,
which is then what your web server then serves up.
Sure, yeah. And it's not just our web server, we've got a CDN scattered all over the world, and so we're serving up that HTML, those assets from servers that are hopefully a lot closer.
Yeah, well, okay. When I say your server,
our infrastructure somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, you've got an infrastructure.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Exactly. Right. So let's take a look at the results. That's the information that we've collected. Now let's take a look at what did we find. So the first thing I want to look at is, ideally, your site. You want to get more visitors. And so, we've looked at a lot of sites, and some sites had just a few pages, and some sites had huge numbers of pages. And you think that has any sort of correlation to how popular a site is? The more sites have more pages, or do more sites, or sites with more visitors have fewer pages? Any ideas?
The most popular sites on the internet have 1 page.
Okay. Yeah, but in general, so there's a few sites that have 1 page that are really popular. What we found was actually, as this was in the data that we collected, as the number of index pages grows, so too the number of visitors per month. Now this doesn't mean throw 1 million pages on your site and you're going to instantly get to 80,000 visitors. No. But of the sites that we looked at, of the ones that had 100,000 or up to 1 million pages, those tended to have a lot of visitors per month. Yes?
So when you say pages, how do you define that? Are you using, say, Google's metric, or is it, we're saying unique content pages, even URLs the same?
We're looking at unique content with unique URLs.
Okay, so if, for instance, my site has an error and 1 million different URLs will take me to the same content.
That I don't think is what we're looking at.
So this is the Google index, number of index pages.
Okay.
You do that API call.
Okay.
Crawl.
So what we see is more pages, correlates to more visitors. Next goal, you want to try to get better search engine ranking. That's a good goal. You want to get more popular, and SEO Moz, one of the sites out there, says if you increase the number of unique linking domains, you're going to get better search engine ranking. And so, how do you get more linking domains? Is there a correlation to number of pages on your site versus linking domains? Do you think there's a correlation there? Well, yes. So as we see, as the number of index pages grows, in this case we're going up to, I can't count, 100,000 or is that a million? A bunch of pages. As we go into more and more pages, we're seeing the number of linking domains, the number of domains that are linking into this site also growing. And we see that that number stays it's pretty predictable. It keeps going in a straight line, and as we get more and more pages, they could all get more and more linking domains. So that's pretty interesting as well. Okay, so that's pretty cool. More pages, more than bound links. So what about clout? What do you think of clout? I don't know. I personally love clout until they change their formula, and all of a sudden my clout goes from 60 down to 30. I hate clout that day. But I don't know. Clout will measure scores for individuals, but also for companies with a presence on the web. And clout actually tends to, number of pages tends to matter with clout score as well. Now clout, I don't know if clout is measuring number of pages in a company's website, but as we see these websites grow to 100,000 to 1 million pages on that site, we're seeing that clout score grow. Now this is the median clout score, and so there's definitely going to be a few people with much bigger clout scores and some companies with much lower clout scores. But we see overall a tendency for the sites with more and more pages, that clout score tends to grow. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Cool. More pages, better clout. So another thing we look. Oh yeah.
This data is all from the same data set?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the same 14,000 or so websites. Another thing we looked at, just again, trying to figure out, well, what happens when we add more pages to a site? So MozRank. MozRank is an indicator of how popular your site is. And we saw that as number of page assets grows, we also saw that MozRank also tended to grow. Again, does this mean throw more assets on the page, you're going to automatically get a higher MozRank? No, but the websites that tended to have average number of page assets across all their pages of 200 assets per page tended to have a higher MozRank. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Content. So overall, we looked at so far three main stats, three main graphs. Number of linking domains goes up as we have more index pages. Number of visitors per month tends to go up as we have more index pages. And number MozRank tends to go up as we have more page assets. Oh, yeah.
As far as assets are concerned, are you 200 plus what exactly?
Could be all sorts of things. It's anything that that is being linked to from that HTML page that's being included. So it could be JavaScript files, could be images, could be CSS files. It's all the things, all the magic that make, or all the files that make your site interesting.
You would consider each of the line items on the graph, the waterfall you showed before, an asset.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is saying if I have more than 200 widgets being loaded as part of that waterfall, I'm going higher than MozRank.
Of the sites that we looked at, the ones that had 200 plus assets, they tended to have a higher MozRank, yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Not necessarily that you will instantly have a higher MozRank if you add 200 assets. Okay. So the next thing is what about time to interact? So I talked about at the beginning. I talked about one of the stats around front-end user experience is that time to interact. How long does it take for me to be able to start typing away in that text box? And so, is there any correlation between number of pages and that particular time? Well, what we found is, yeah, there was definitely a correlation there. And in fact, as the sites tended to have more pages, tended to kind of suck. So their time to interact got worse. We saw their time to interact going up into the 10. Yeah. Okay. 10 plus seconds as we got into the million pages. Okay. Cool. Yep.
Is that perhaps because the people with websites with a million pages have enough money to really screw up their
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's maybe they've just got so many pages they can't handle the work required to keep their site optimized.
Well, I think in part there's also the aspect of like larger companies have more engineers, have more content to create. Thus, the more engineers working on it, it's harder to keep a lean site,
Right.
people implementing things in the
Right.
site, etc. So I think there's like sort of like the looking at cause and effect isn't
Yeah.
as clear, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've at a previous company that I worked at, much bigger company, a lot of content going up, and they tried to be careful about making sure images were small, making sure JavaScript, they had as few JavaScript files as possible, and same thing with CSS. And yet there would be it just took one really bad file, one huge image or something to slow down the site by so much. Just one thing leaked through and it drops, or it gets much, much slower. So, yeah.
Can you help me out with indexed pages?
Mm-hmm.
Say I've got a site with 10 pages,
Okay.
but my site requires a login.
Mm-hmm.
And every page I look at from then on has my name at the top.
Okay.
And I've got 1,000 customers.
Okay.
Does that mean now I've got 10,000 indexed pages? Or do I still have only 10?
Ilya, would you like to?
Yeah, so here we're at the mercy of the data available from the search engines that crawl. So the search engines probably don't crawl the logged in pages. And that, by the way, is why we looked at 14,000 sites and not 20 or 30 sites. So that the average is, so we can start to see patterns. Because yeah, for some sites there's plenty of content behind passwords, others there isn't. We wanted to see, is there general trends? That's why we went to large numbers.
No, I thought that Google Analytics does crawl logged in pages. Does it not?
Google Analytics will report on it, but the Google bot will not crawl. So that's the difference, right? So like Analytics thing where you're putting the pixel on your site to be able to see those pages and report them within the interface, but Google bot can't log into your site.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And
Okay.
have you seen pages with advertising where the advertisers have explicitly figured out on a per browser basis how to wedge the page so that the user can't type anywhere and is forced to stare at the ad for the maximum amount of time?
So, sorry, I didn't.
Well,
see
okay,
the
so there's
question.
some pages out there, and
Yeah.
in particular that website that has like 1.5 billion
Right.
visitors a year, but only has one page. But I've seen this happen on other websites that are less popular.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, for example, I was wondering today if it was happening on Wayfair. But I had seen, and I've never been able to figure it out, but it seems like some advertisers know how to put something really nasty in their JavaScript so that let's say half your site loads. And
Right.
they keep the rest of the site from loading
Right.
so that you can't type anywhere. And that's basically they're hijacking
Mm-hmm.
your impression. Hopefully the user will get bored and will have to click on that link that takes them
Yeah.
off to the other site. I mean, have you seen that?
I haven't experienced that exact issue, so I don't.
And you're told, because that might, because you're using browsers to do something.
Yep.
Experiment.
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe that's one of the effects. Maybe some of these bigger websites with a lot of pages.
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't seen that scenario, so I don't know what it's doing. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if we're looking at that.
You might, well, I guess.
Yeah, well, if you have exact specific sites in mind, we'd love to try it out.
Yeah.
Not right now, but afterwards.
Yeah.
We can cover that. Cool. Thanks. Anyone else? Yeah.
Why index page is a relevant indicator, and what does index page mean in terms of value of the site?
Yeah.
Nobody can ask any.
Why is not, the actual reason why isn't answered so much in the data we've seen. Well, what is answered, what we're seeing is, we're seeing, sites that have lots of pages have a slower time to interact, or, these are just what we've seen, not necessarily you do this, therefore you're gonna get that, yeah.
So we've tried to figure out what's the relationship between content and these other parameters, the user experience, user engagement. Number of indexed pages is a proxy for how much content there is on that site. So some of the metrics here, you'll see this is a number of indexed pages, that's a metric for a site. Number of assets, that's a metric for a given page.
Right.
So we've tried to look at a mix of sites with a ton of pages, as well as pages, some with a lot of assets, some with little.
Some of these are perhaps a little bit more obvious. We've all gone to a page that's bigger. If you have a bigger site, it's obviously going to take a lot longer to download. This is looking at an 8 meg page, which is huge, taking 25 seconds, assuming you have an awesome connection, which you probably don't have on your phone. So 25 seconds. And so this is in the data that we collected. There were sites that had 8 megs of content that's being downloaded, taking 25 seconds. Oh, I hate those sites. And so at larger pages, tends to be slower pages. And we saw, looking at some of the different types of assets, looking at just images. Obviously, as the more image content, as you increase the amount of image content, it's going to take longer to download. So hopefully that's kind of obvious as well. As the number of JavaScripts go up, this isn't talking about size of JavaScripts, just the number, just how many JavaScripts. The time to interact tends to go up. Because every single time the browser needs to make another connection to download another file, that time just builds up, and you have to. You're spending a bit more time. Does this mean that, say, 11 JavaScripts means I'm going to take 10 seconds? Well, the sites that have 11 JavaScripts tend to have not only 11 JavaScripts, but a lot of other stuff on that site, and so that's why it's up to 10 plus seconds. It kind of makes sense, yeah?
Is number of JavaScripts number of JavaScript actions on page load? Or
Number of JavaScript files.
Okay, so assets.
So if I'm downloading Backbone, I'm downloading.
Sure, so just number of independent
Yes.
files. Okay.
So this is independent of what their size might be.
Okay, what's it?
Is it only on the local domain, or are you looking also at
Some of these, across all the sites that we looked at, there were some that had most of the stuff all hosted locally, and then there were others that had stuff hosted all over the place. I'm sure some of them might be hosting on Git, which is terrible. So yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
Well, about 2 slides back, you had something that looked not only like an increase in time, but an exponential increase, which should be really,
Was it?
well, both of those two.
Okay, yeah.
It looked like the beginning of an exponential curve, really.
Right. It's just, again, of the sites that had that many, again, this is not, if I'm going to have 5 megs of image files, I tend to have a lot of other stuff as well. So yeah, it's pretty interesting that it is going up pretty steeply. It'd be interesting if we could find really awful sites that show it continues to go up that way.
It might just be X squared.
Yeah. So I actually have been running an experience myself and trying to create a really bad site God, it turned out to be really difficult to make a really awful site. I don't know how these people do it.
Are there sites that are so bad that your browsers just give up on them? And
Well, I mean,
if it takes 5 minutes to load it, does it even?
what happens when your browser tries to load up a site that is so slow, it's taking 60 seconds, a couple minutes to download, it times out, it just gives up. So that's what's going to happen here. And I don't know how many of the sites, if there were many sites that just timed out and gave up. Do you know if there were any ones that timed out?
Yeah, at 60 seconds, we stopped measuring and it was less than 1%.
Less than 1%, okay. So yeah, we saw that. CSS size, again, we see as the size goes up, time to interact tends to go up. Okay, so more content drives traffic, so that's cool. More content slows down the site. Oh, that sucks. So what does that slow performance mean? Is slow performance something I can handle? Is that something I want? Because it drives traffic, that's good. Can I live with it? Well, here's something a bit more interesting. Here we're looking at number of visits per person per month. That's what's going up on the y-axis. And time to interact on the x-axis. And as we see time to interact increase, so as time to interact increases that way, we see the number of visits per person per month decreasing. So less than 4 seconds time to interact, we see 1.78 or so visits per person per month across all these sites. 12 plus seconds, we're seeing down towards the 1.58 visits per person per month. So we're seeing a decrease, a general decrease in how many times does a person come back to the site? Is he visiting the site just once, or is he going to come back after a few days or a few weeks or so? Yep.
Can a person come back to the same site multiple times in a day? What's your visit threshold?
I don't know where a visit, how long between page loads does how long does it have to be for it to become a second visit? I don't know.
What's the source for that metric?
Alexa.
Yeah. Yep, got that? Yeah. Okay. So here's another one, pages per visit. So we see as the time to interact gets longer, we see pages per, or visits per person per month is going down. And then each of those visits, the pages that they see, as the time to interact increases, the number of pages that they're actually going to look at on that visit is also tending to go down. So that sucks. So, as we get slower, the people just aren't coming back, and when they come back, they're not looking at more pages. So they browse less. Okay, so content.
That assumes that you want them to see lots of pages.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so that's bad if you want people to.
It depends on what your
Depends on
site's doing.
Sure.
Maybe you've got a tremendous search feature that can go straight to
Right.
two
Yeah.
page loads.
Yep. And if that's your ideal thing, is that you want them to see those 2 pages and leave, then yeah, that's great. So if you're not one of those sites and you do want people to stick around a while, then more content, which we saw means better SEO, plus less content for better performance. That's what we want. More, but less. That would be awesome. So how do we get more, but less? Well, we need to optimize. And there's a lot of ways you can optimize a site. And we can do this for you, or you can do it yourself. There's some pretty well-known techniques. You can look at Steve Souders' books. You can look at some other books that have come out more recently on this topic that talk about all these techniques. There's plenty of blogs on the web that talk about how to do this stuff. When we've got lots of requests, how do we fix that? Reduce the number of requests by combining those scripts, by combining those images, by using data URIs where appropriate. When it comes to large assets, well, make them smaller, whether it means GZIP or minifying those JavaScript and CSS files, or dealing with using compression. If we're, some browsers, like some versions of IE, only allow maybe 2 connections open at a time, or a few more connections up at a time. Per domain. Maybe we split those assets across multiple domains to make it easier to download, or make it faster to download all those, so you can download those in parallel. So different ways of doing that as well. So I want to go through just a few, we actually got an ebook. If you go to the page, you can sign up and grab that ebook that talks about some of those techniques. No cost to that. But here's a typical example. Here's an example of a page. This looks like it's Fox Searchlight. I've got a bunch of JavaScript files. I've got a whole bunch of CSS files. And that's pretty typical from sites that I've seen on the web. I often go visit a site and look at the source and figure out what are they doing. So there's a lot of stuff on these. And actually, I mentioned that I did a test myself. I tried to create a really awful site. And it turned out to be kind of difficult, but I managed to do it. And you can see that the site that I created, which was awful, in fact, I was told several times to make it worse. So the download size is 1.7 megs. A lot of stuff to download. And that's 66 requests. That's not too bad, but 36 CSS files, 4 JavaScript files, 18 images. I see a time to interact of 4 seconds. Not that good. This was actually a site that I added to Yottaa, and this is a site that is automatically optimized. But we've got a feature in Optimizer that says, well, if you have any sort of, maybe there's an issue that has come up for some reason, you want to rule out Yottaa causing the problem, you can pause the optimizer. And so what I've done is pause the optimizer, and this is what I see in Monitor. I see this is the performance when we are not using Yottaa to optimize the site. And so I ran through, does it show me how many samples I got? This one's about 120 samples, looked at 12 different locations around the world, 10 samples in each location, and this is the results I got. This is the top level result. And then I added some JavaScript. And so I randomly chose a bunch of JavaScript libraries to include on the page. Not a really good collection, but a bunch of sliders, because I often go to pages and see that they've included 15 different sliders, because probably they tried one, they didn't like it, they tried another one, but forgot to delete the first one. So they got a bunch of JavaScript files on here, and that's what I've done. I've created a bunch of JavaScript files, and then tried to monitor that, test that. And I saw that, and again, keeping this optimizer paused, so I'm not optimizing this at all. But now, my number of JavaScript files is 18, number of requests 80, CSS file stays at 36 because I didn't change anything there. And the time to interact went from 4 seconds to 5 seconds. Okay, so definitely getting worse. Then I turned on Optimizer. But there's 2 features in Optimizer for concatenating the JavaScript files and minifying the JavaScript files. Again, those are things that you could do on your own, but I happen to be using Yottaa. And with those 2 features disabled, I saw that time to interact went down to 3.5 seconds. Okay, definitely an improvement. Number of requests went down to 52, CSS files went down to 21. One of the things that, as you use Yottaa, we'll optimize it, and then we'll keep optimizing, try to make it better and better as your visitors use it more. And so we'll see that number of CSS files, I think we'll see that go down. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's the 3rd test. Again, every one of these tests, I'm looking at 12 locations, 10 samples in each location. Turned on reduce JavaScript requests. so that it basically takes all those different JavaScript files and combines them into as few JavaScript files as make sense. Some of them didn't make sense to combine, so we try to figure out which ones make sense and which ones don't. We combine all those things, and we end up with 5 JavaScript files. That's a lot better than 18, I think is what I had before. Time to interact has gone down to 2.6 seconds. Definitely a big improvement over what I had before. And finally, when I did that, here's that little bit of source where I saw that list of JavaScript files. Here's what I see after the optimizer has run. Basically, I've got Angular as a separate JavaScript file, and then I've got this one, which is a JavaScript file that we generate based on your content, all your JavaScript files. So we created one single JavaScript that you can download much more quickly. Did that test one more time, turning on minification, automatic minification, so that anytime you upload a new JavaScript file, we'll automatically minify and combine it with those existing files. We're down to 4 JavaScript files. CSS files has also decreased as we use it more. And time to interact just over 2 seconds, 2.2 seconds. So that's pretty cool. We saw each of the, in fact, I've got a paused right at the beginning. This was the worst case, actually before the JavaScript files, 4 seconds, added the JavaScript files and optimized down to drops in half about. So that's kind of cool. So that's just an indicator showing how much of a difference it is between using lots of JavaScript files and few. John?
Do you have data across all the things you're optimizing, so like which filters have the biggest impact on performance? Because this is like a somewhat contrived example. You see the aggregate numbers. Like, is minifying JavaScript the number one thing that you guys see using one time, or is it
okay.
optimizing images, or is it?
Yeah, so our optimization, most of these features are always turned on by default.
Sure.
And one of the reasons this is actually going a blog post. This last 5 tests is a blog post that we're going to put up probably tomorrow. And one of the reasons I did this is because I want to answer that question. I want to go through each of the features and see, well, how does concatenating JavaScript files, how does that compare to concatenating a bunch of CSS files, or optimizing the image files, or doing all that? So that's the question I want to answer through blog posts like that.
Right, but I mean, you can split test across a lot of sites.
Sure.
If you can get the site owners to be unoptimized after traffic.
Right.
So
Turn it off for us. Yeah.
to some extent, it depends how much fat there is. If the JavaScript file has a ton of comments, you have long variable names.
Well, that's kind of why I'm saying like it makes sense to do an aggregate, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
So that's the topic of a bigger study where a large number of sites, we do the on and off, the full factorial of all the optimizations on.
Yeah.
Did you study sites like you could put on this site, put a Facebook like button, put Google Analytics, put I mean, there's at least 10 different analytics and 10 different kinds of like buttons.
The de-optimizer mode.
Yeah.
And see what happens when you try to optimize that.
What we have doesn't cover that exact question, but one of the things that you can do with, if you're using all those widgets, I hope not, but if you are using all those widgets, one thing you can do with the site monitor is either monitor a full web page, or just monitor the API, the Twitter API, or just monitor a Facebook widget. So you can have something that just watches that limited set and see, alert you if there's any sort of issue. Send you an SMS when Twitter goes down. So that's something that you can manage or monitor with our tools. Okay. Question here.
On this slide,
Yep.
I see images 7K. I
Yes.
thought originally it was images many over a megabyte.
Yeah. So I noticed that a couple hours ago, and when I look at the site, all the images, all the content is there. But one of the things that I don't know where. I mean, they're all there, but it's definitely a The download is much smaller, so I haven't had a chance to see, but that's a good question.
Well, maybe it was an image sprite.
Right.
Could have been, it could have been, it's something, it's a question.
Well, but it's 7K, it was previously over a megabyte, so.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe
So
the,
that's a remarkable,
remarkable improvement. That was the remarkable improvement I hope no one would notice.
there's an inline image thing. So
Yeah.
It turned it into a hexadecimal.
It would,
embedding.
if we did that, the HTML size would definitely be a lot bigger. But that's, so data URIs is something you can do with smaller images, but
You
yeah.
guys maybe like compressing Java or not JavaScript, JPEGs or anything like that?
Yep, yeah, so we're doing some
You'll
optimization,
compress it.
right, but it's not gonna take 1.9 megs down to
Low
7K.
enough quality.
Yeah. We're awesome, we're not that awesome. Yeah.
Is it caching the images on your CDN?
It could, no, that wouldn't be, yes, again, this is a question I need to figure out myself. I'm not sure what happened there, but I was definitely seeing a huge improvement.
I mean, it's possible that, let's say, if you had an image that had width and height is 10 by 10,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at 1 meg,
Right.
that your thing was smart enough to say it only needs
Sure.
10 by 10 pixels, so just
Yep.
turn it into a PNG.
And I definitely included some stupid images, stupid sizes images.
that's a cheap-
So again, I have to see, doesn't account for 7K, but, and basically here I'm looking at time to interact across those 5 different tests. First one is no optimizations, no JavaScript, no optimizations, but I've added the JavaScript. And then I turn on Optimizer and turn on the different JavaScript features. And I see that time to interact go down further and further. And we saw earlier, as time to interact goes down, we have more page views per visitor per month. So this is a good thing. We want to have time to interact go down as small as possible. Okay, so pretty cool, pretty interesting. Any other questions so far? I got some more stuff. How am I doing on time, John?
Sure.
Okay. So how can you, what are some other tools you can do? Sprites, CSS sprites. If you're not using Yottaa or another great tool out there is spriteme.org or Automatic for creating these types of sprites. Basically, we've got all the images, all the little icons and X and here, this is actually from Yottaa's site, the CSV, HIR, and some other icons that we have on our site are all combined into a single image and then using some creative CSS, displaying just portions of that in different places. So you download that image one time, then reuse it all over the place. Data URIs, we've kind of talked about data URIs. They're magic, they're not quite that magic to go down to 7K, but they're still pretty cool. And here's another great example, image compression. So this is a test for you. Watch the screen. I've got 2 images. Basically, I took a screenshot as I was editing this presentation. And I took the screenshot and then I optimized the screenshot in, I used Image Alpha and Image Optim on my local machine to make an optimized version of that PNG file. So the first one's a PNG file, the second one's a PNG file. Okay, here's the first one. Got it? Okay. Here's the second one. Did you see a difference? Let me go back. Here's the first one. Oh, you saw the change there. Here's the second one. Now, there's a bit of a fade to make it harder to see. But, so there's the second, there's the first. Going backwards, you can see the difference, but they're still pretty close. I wouldn't know right now which one's which. This happens to be the second one. Okay, so what I've done is optimize that image in some tools that are freely available on my Mac. Assume they're freely available on PCs as well. And the difference between these two is that the original was 1.1 megs, the optimized one, 185K. And they look the same. Now, granted, it's a projector. Projectors never produce the same image, but even on here, if you come up here and look at it, It's pretty damn close. So that's great, except that 185K is assuming that I'm going to put it on my webpage as a 1200 by something image, which I'm not. I'm probably going to do like 200 by something image. And so if I shrink that and optimize, I'm down to about 23K. So that's a huge, I mean, there's 1 meg to 23K. That's not quite as magical as the 1.7 megs to 7K, but still, it's pretty awesome. And that's using freely available tools, not using us. So that's pretty interesting. Let's see what else we got. So optimizing, definitely important. There's a lot of optimization techniques you can use. You can use us, we'll do it for you quickly, automatically, or there's plenty of tools, plenty of techniques you can use to do it yourself as well. Okay, but you want to test it first. You want to test your site before you do anything, and while you're doing it, and after, and ongoing. You want to keep a monitor going on your site. How fast is it today? How fast is it tomorrow? Is it better? Is it worse? What changed? Testing, and testing often, is really important. And so I'm just going to show a few screenshots from our tool, from Yottaa. And another time that I gave a somewhat similar talk, the sponsor was Rue La La. And so I looked at their site, and I plugged in their site into our website test. And right at the first screen, you're plugging in the URL. You're saying, well, do I want to have a single browser, single location, single connectivity type? Or do I want to say multi-location? So test across 12, 15 different locations all at once. Or do I want to use, look at one location but test on 5, 6, 7 different browsers? Or multiple connectivities, one browser, one location, but test it on a really fast connection, on a really slow connection. And then I can say, well, in this case I chose multi-browser, and I chose to do it from San Francisco. And actually, you can see that this is a little bit of an old screenshot. This is about 1 month old. And Amsterdam is missing, and Sydney is missing, and there might be another one that's missing. Those are newer locations that we've added. So we can say, in San Francisco, test on Chrome, Firefox 13, and a few other Firefox versions, and IE 8 and IE 9. Do that once time, and then say how many times you want to test it. In this case, I want to run it 90 times. 90 times 10, 12 locations, or whatever that was. And I can click on Run Test. And when it runs, it's going to give me here's the list of all the monitors that I've been using on my site, in my account. And this is Rue La La and a few other things I've been looking at. And when I click on the Rue La La site, I can see some general information about this monitor. And I can see, okay, it's running 2.2 seconds. And this is before login, so I'm not logging in, I'm just looking at the pages that are available to me without logging in. And so when we look at any page, we'll show you, that kind of high-level information. We'll show you the screenshots of what happened at each interval over the course of loading the page. And below that, we show a really nice waterfall visualization. So you can, and as you hover over, you'll be able to see more detail. Click on any one of these things, you'll see more detail about that particular request. What was the what were the headers and all that, you'll see right from here. Okay, so that's pretty cool, except this version is slightly different. This is after login. So one of the things you can also do is plug in your credentials and have it test the site based on a logged in, based on your credentials. Here I see the screenshots for the logged in page. Now I see all the stuff that Rue La La sells. And in fact, I can scroll this over and see, as this one's 5 and a bit seconds, I see what happens at each one of those seconds along the process of loading the page. So that's pretty cool. Okay, that's enough of that video. You can also click on the little video link that it will play back. Okay, what's it like to actually experience this page. And I see, okay, that wasn't too bad. Let's try that again. Oh, okay, yep. Now I understand what it's like for a user in wherever this was recorded, and on whichever browser this was. I can try it from different browsers in different locations and see if the experience is exactly the same or close enough. And I can do that all from our interface. We'll also give you some trending information as well. Be able to drill down on this data. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to show you that data that we collected across 14,000 sites. I wanted to show you, well, what can you do to optimize your site? You know, can you make sure you're not one of the people that are awful on here? And how can you make sure that your site is faster? From pretty easy things. You know, there were some simple things you can do, like image compression, and it results in something that doesn't look much different. And look at monitoring. And again, the monitoring, you'll get some of those features when you sign up for this free monitoring account. And so if you want to try it yourself, you can either look at that, or you can look at that URL, yottaa.com/FEDev. I don't think it's case sensitive. Or if you're one of the cool kids and you want to scan your QR code, you can do that too. So thanks. Any questions? Any further questions? We've had a lot of questions. Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking about, this sample set of 14,000 websites, these are your customers, or how
No.
did you pick these?
We collected a lot. Do you want to answer that one? I'm not sure what the correct answer is.
Yeah, so we have a few partners. A few partners collect information. So for example, HubSpot's website grader. Cool. So there's a bunch of tools like that where people enter the URL. So it's not us choosing it. It's not the vendors choosing it. It's what sites, what pages do people care about. So by collecting a bunch of these, we get a pretty broad sample of the internet from over the course of a few days.
So you define the set of sites as sites that people, that consumers.
Yeah, we wanted a broad. So it's not.
But you had to define the set of sites you're looking at.
We wanted to take a random sampling,
Right.
pretty random.
Okay.
And so maybe,
Well, I mean, like-
I'm not answering your question.
Like, if you define random, you generate, arbitrary domains and go until you find ones that work. So it's obviously not random. You're looking at, in one case, like sites that people are submitting. So, that's not a random selection. My initial concern that prompted the question was, if these are customers of an optimization service.
No.
They're sites.
These are not customers of an optimization.
If they're not, that's an improvement, but I'm just then curious, if there's any greater sense of the set of sites that you're looking at.
So the reason we didn't take, let's say, the top million Alexa sites and randomly pick a bunch of sites is because we captured user experience and site complexity data. We wanted to marry that with a database of the search engine rankings for the site, the cloud score, all those things. So to do that, we teamed up with partners that have that data we wanted thousands of sites to do the data compared to that. Is that?
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, I forgot my little bag of goodies. And that you way in the back, you were asking all sorts of. I gotta work on my aim there. There you go. Cool car. You got more questions? Come on. How can you pass up on the Yottaa car? Well, thanks so much for. Oh, yes, Maureen.
Oh, well, I was just wondering, what are some trigger points where people may want to use your service? Why would they come to you guys and want to use your
Awesome.
service? What? No.
Because we're awesome. No, sorry, what was the question?
What are some trigger points of why people would want to use your service? I guess the other part of my question is, I'm also was a co-founder of a startup, and I brought that I met your CTO, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wanted him to try it on our website. He was basically offended, thinking that he had done the best computing and this would be an insult. So
I'm sure that wasn't his real reaction.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
But so I was just wondering, what are some trigger points of why when we bring people to you, is there was some value that you add, or comments you
Right.
heard back from people, either non-clients or clients?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple reasons people will come to us. First, they just want to understand what's going on with their site. It's so easy to look at, open up your browser and see how the site is performing in your browser, but it's not really a great indicator of how it's performing for everyone. And so they really want to understand how is their site performing for everyone. And so that's probably one of the big reasons why people come to us. Also, optimizing that site in a very efficient, very automatic yet customizable way. So that's our other thing that brings people to us. I think those are probably the two major things.
So there's a free tool, so you can check out
Sure.
how your site behaves from whether across the US, or if you care about the whole world, you pick the locations you care about, run the free test. So within a minute, you'll
Check these things
know
out.
reliably how's your site doing.
Yeah, I think it's a great tool.
Yeah, and then depending on what you find, eventually,
these
a
things.
rule of thumb might be 6 or 7 seconds if you're slower than that.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, there we go.
Clients, we had
Thank you.
100 countries in 2 months of starting the site. We had
I suck at
over
this.
100
I'm scared of hitting
The
that.
people were saying that the website was slow to open.
Very
So
good.
we had
Well done.
feedback from people saying that the website, so I heard about this. So we had actual feedback. But still, I think some people might take
So-
work.
That's no, I don't agree. It's impossible to offend Bob.
No, the CTOs of the website.
Now, it's easy for him to offend now. No.
Yeah.
So if you want, we can test it right now. If somebody's got a.
Okay, well, maybe not in
Yeah.
front of everybody.
No, I just want to be quick, we'll have to get straight into it.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe we can wrap it up and then.
So thanks so much for joining me. If you have any questions, you can reach me on Twitter on Technovangelist or on